The ancestors of the Belmont family are doomed to confront the power of evil incarnate, Dracula. That just about sums up what you'll find in any Castlevania game, and it's how the prologue to Bloodlines begins. Castlevania games span over several centuries and feature numerous heroes, proving how Dracula's tyranny is timeless. In 1994, Konami released Castlevania Bloodlines, which takes place earlier in the 20th century, making a new point on the series timeline. I believe this is the first time none of the playable characters carry the Belmont name. Your two options are John Morris from Texas, USA, and Eric Lecard from Segovia, Spain, with a French name it seems. The prologue implies that they're both ancestors of the Belmonts, however. John carries their famous whip, the Vampire Killer. Eric fights with the Alucard spear, and most of my footage for this video uses Eric. Now how about this title screen? Bloody letters dripping down into a whole lake of blood, or at least that's what it looks like. Nintendo almost always censored blood in games for their consoles, but this is instead a Genesis title, or of course Mega Drive. Konami had hopped around to try a few different systems for Castlevania. As you'll see shortly, they got very creative working with Genesis. In this adventure, you'll travel all over Europe, tracing the journey of Countess Elizabeth Bartley, Dracula's niece. She supposedly orchestrated World War I as a distraction for her to resurrect her uncle. Her name is most likely a reference to a real-life historical figure, Elizabeth Báthory, a Hungarian noblewoman and alleged serial killer nicknamed the Blood Countess. Naturally, Stage 1 takes place at the ruins of Castle Dracula in Romania, and Elizabeth has traveled to 6 countries in total. The map of Europe showing this is well made, as is the camera pan before the first stage starts. The stage itself looks very nice too, and I want to call it colorfully dark, whether that makes sense or not. Despite the darkness, there's enough contrast for me to easily see my character, which is something that previous titles struggled with at times. Before I go through the game, I want to outline the differences between John and Eric. I'm not sure how to judge the game for this, but I didn't enjoy playing as John, and he has the series' main weapon. Not everyone likes the whip to begin with, but I've played enough Castlevania to get used to it. Or so I thought. Something doesn't feel right about this whip, and its restricted movement is just bizarre to me. Simon figured out how to whip left, right, up, down, and all the diagonals, and John figured out, what's this guy doing? Just whip straight up, I'm begging you. I guess the Vampire Killer whip doesn't pass on its directional knowledge from the Belmont ancestors. Mr. Morris goes back to basics and only whips left or right on the ground. However, he can whip diagonally up if he's jumping. To say I question that decision would be an understatement. Why do I have to jump for that? In the end, he feels like a challenge character even though he's the default option. Eric, on the other hand, is wonderful to play with. The spear can be used in 5 different directions from the ground and reaches slightly further than the whip. You might argue that he's too powerful, and perhaps the two characters could be balanced a little more. In any case, I suggest using Eric if you're trying to get into this game. It feels like the combat was designed more for his capabilities, and he can also use his spear to essentially pole vault and reach new heights. Additionally, the spear's maximum upgrade is the Blazing Spear, which allows Eric to use mystic attacks. Be careful though, because the spear downgrades from its blazing state if Eric takes any damage. So, back to Romania, and back to the beginning of the series once again. By this time, several Castlevania games contained a callback to the very first level of the series, so I don't think the impact of the first stage is very strong here. Some enemies are different, and there are minor layout changes, and it looks nice. Then you run into Hellhound. It's a good first boss, and it uses the environment by shattering the windows with its howl. But the stage isn't over. This is just a mid-boss, and there are some unseen parts of Dracula's castle afterwards. In the second half of Stage 1, the scenery gets bigger and bolder, and you'll start seeing more mechanical traps. They may not be a huge threat now, but moving elements play a crucial part in making this game memorable. The first stage seems low effort compared with the rest of the game, barely scratching the surface of the developer's creativity. As you leave the top of the castle, you'll have to walk up the skeleton of some giant creature and it crumbles away behind you. Somewhat creative, and then a new song kicks in. It's the original theme for the climb up to Dracula in Castlevania 1. And there's a big staircase up to a boss. Well, it's not Dracula. This is the Armor Battler. It's cute, isn't it? I don't actually have many problems with Stage 1, I just wish it spent more time on unique challenges. After all, I want this game to be its own unique self. I can be harsher on that stage now that I know what follows, and I'm happy to say this game contains very novel designs from here. The vampire hunters follow Elizabeth's trail to Greece and through the Atlantis Shrine. This is beautiful. The sunset colors stand out from other stages, and the water below reflects everything almost as perfectly as a mirror. It's also quickly rising and lowering, which could be a distraction. I don't know how those candles are floating there, but they're a key component of most Castlevania games, so they can stay. And what a song, too. However, just as you get comfortable here, it all changes. Every substage within this shrine changes the gimmick, and the second part is a dramatic change. It's sort of like a tower, and it's slowly sinking into the water. Everyone knows vampire hunters can't swim. Atlantis has a sequence of mini-bosses in the middle, and the golem is waiting at the end as another boss. There are in fact a lot of big battles in this game, and bosses will eat away at your health even if you survive. So you can expect many deaths and a few game overs, which is normal, except your game overs are limited. I'm surprised to see this old trope here. On the default settings, 3 deaths lead to a game over, and 3 game overs lead to the game really being over. Some old games use continues to limit your progress, which is seen in arcade games to make more money. It also made more money when games were commonly rented. The large number of bosses served a couple of purposes. They were difficult enough to keep players from reaching the end of the game, and they made the game longer without extending the levels. As such, people had to rent the game more. I did enjoy all of these bosses, and it differentiated Bloodlines from other Castlevanias. It's a shame that my enjoyment was interrupted by an outdated game over system. Fortunately, you can tweak the settings if you need help. In the options menu accessed from the title screen, you can set the number of lives before a game over up to 5. That would mean you have 15 total lives before a full restart instead of 9. Additionally, you can change the game's difficulty from normal to easy. And of course, whenever you clear a stage, you are presented with a password, which can be inputted from the title screen in order to start later in the game. Through research, I discovered that some passwords come with 9 lives and 7 continues. I still don't like the continue feature, but at the end of the day, it's barely an issue. The European tour leaves Greece for Italy and into the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's a struggle just to get inside through all the harpies surrounding the entrance. There's also a split path inside the tower, but you don't get to choose your path now. You already chose this path when you chose your character. Here's a room with a big gap that you can't jump across, so instead, why not attach John's whip to the ceiling and swing to the other side? That's a weird and underutilized ability. Eric's alternative is to pole vault up to the higher platforms in the previous room. I don't know the purpose of this split because both characters fight the Bone Dragon regardless of their path. Eric's pole vault can be used in several places throughout the game, but I found no use for the swing whip if it wasn't required. In the second half of Stage 3, there are a couple different auto-scrollers. The developers were seemingly fond of auto-scrollers, which can be controversial. These ones were innovative and often added to the atmosphere. The ascent up the Blue Tower was mediocre, but the lead up to the end of the level was crazy. It involves climbing up endless small platforms outside the tower with the screen scroll changing different directions. Well, words can't fully describe this, so see for yourself. I find the music very fitting for this, although it's not the ideal song to listen to for an entire stage. The Genesis was known for providing unusual sounds. Most songs in this game manipulate the sound chip exceedingly well, while plenty of sound effects in this game aren't quite what I expected, especially the whip sound, unfortunately. Onwards to Stage 4, the munitions factory in Germany. Seems like a risky place to be in the middle of a world war. I don't have too much to say about the stage overall, but it's a good one. It's a setting that makes sense for all these moving parts like the gears and pistons, and Gear Steamer is an unusual boss. Its appearance is different from any other monster I've seen in the series so far, and I enjoyed the method of fighting it. Meanwhile, Stage 5 awaits in France at the Palace of Versailles, once again beginning outside. It looks somewhat like a jungle out here, and there are even skeleton monkeys, my least favorite enemies in the game. The way they swing around in a huge circle drives me crazy. I later went back to test this section on easy mode, which removes a few minor enemies, but all of the skeleton monkeys were still present. Bumpy first substage aside, the rest of this palace level is good. There's another forced split path where John needs to use the whip to swing across a gap, and Eric needs to pole vault up to the roof. This time, their different paths contain unique experiences, and they meet at opposite ends of a giant rotating spiral staircase. Afterwards, there are 3 mini-bosses leading up to the main boss. They aren't easing up on these battles anytime soon, and I enjoyed them all. My main criticism is probably that the game feels too short at 6 stages. Because of the game over system, it was incredibly challenging to reach the end anyway, but I would rather see a couple more stages and a less restrictive live setup. With that said, it's possible that Konami had already squeezed everything they could onto the cartridge. There are quite a few ridiculous visual effects throughout the game which may have taken up more space than usual. We're about to see a few more in the final stage. Stage 6 heads to England at the Castle Prosperina. There may be approximately 11 million castles in the UK, but Prosperina is not one of them. This fake castle was named after the Roman goddess Prosperina, and its song Calling from Heaven makes me think of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. No, not necessarily the part everyone knows. I'm thinking more of the third movement and how climactic it feels. This stage begins with a simple bridge into the castle, and as soon as you're inside, the visuals go wild. What am I looking at here? It seems to be a normal castle room when suddenly the screen breaks into a few horizontal strips. Each strip shows your character at a different alignment, and the platforms are cleverly placed to make you think about your jumps. The enemies shouldn't overwhelm you, but they might make you rush your jumps and misjudge a gap. And when that room is over, it seems like you're upside down. From here to the end, it's bosses, bosses, bosses. The armor battler returns in a different fashion, in a long hallway leading to Death himself. Death brought some playing cards representing the main bosses from stages 2 to 5, and you'll have to fight them all over again. Thankfully, they're weaker than before, and when Death attacks after running out of cards, he isn't nearly as ruthless as he has been previously in the series. Once you're free from Death, it's time for more bosses. There's Elizabeth Bartley, and first she summons Medusa. Let's recap quickly. In this stage alone, you just fought all the main bosses from the previous stages, Death, now Medusa, and immediately after you'll fight the Countess too. Elizabeth's fight is something new, and you need to be patient to figure out how to defeat her. All that fighting may sound unreasonable, and maybe it is if you're sticking to the default lives and continues. What I will say is, I've played through this game with Eric a couple times, and the bosses become significantly more manageable with experience. Of course, that still isn't the end. Elizabeth may be defeated, but she completed what she set out to do. Dracula has been resurrected once again. I enjoyed this rendition of battling with him. I didn't quite understand how to deal with his monster transformation, and that made it very difficult to finish the game. As a whole, he isn't as difficult as other versions have been, which I think is appropriate given the way this game is set up. It's a short ending, at least on normal mode. You've fulfilled your destiny as a vampire hunter, and now you can do it all again on expert mode. Maybe some other time for me. I still haven't played all the way through as John either. Now, I'm not sure if my assessment of the whole game will be surprising, but I'd have to say this was the most enjoyable Castlevania so far. It may be short and linear. It may have a character I haven't gelled with yet. It may have an outdated game over system. Have I mentioned that enough yet? I just really enjoyed playing it, so I will be holding it above the earlier titles. The stages were all engaging, and it's honestly incredible that I didn't hate any of the bosses. There were a ton of them too. If this were a previous Castlevania game, I probably wouldn't have liked all these bosses, so this game worked wonders. Therefore, my final score for Castlevania Bloodlines will be 8.3 out of 10. No, I didn't beat this game on the default settings. I don't see why I shouldn't take advantage of options offered within the game though. Konami wanted everyone to enjoy their game even if they didn't want players to beat it quickly. It's only 6 stages just like the original Castlevania, although they're fairly extensive. The length is similar to the other games of the series, even though it felt shorter. I would recommend this game for sure. The Genesis as a whole is a blind spot for me, so I'm happy I have more to recommend than just Sonic. Amazingly, Bloodlines wasn't re-released for 25 years until it became more accessible in 2019. It's part of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, and was also included on the Sega Genesis Mini. When the Genesis became available with Nintendo Switch Online, Bloodlines was one of the rare Castlevania games included in the deal. Unfortunately, this is the worst-selling console Castlevania game of all time. My opinion of the game was not swayed by this. In fact, I only found this out as I was typing these very words. It was reviewed positively in the US too. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave an average score of 8.25 out of 10 and called it the game the Genesis needed. Clearly, Castlevania fans didn't go for it. I also checked out a Japanese magazine covering this console exclusively, Beep Mega Drive. Their average score was 6.25 out of 10. I mean, I get it, this doesn't present itself as an accessible game. These reviewers had to make opinions for a ton of games every month, and they surely couldn't explore everything about them. Tell me, did you agree with the points I've made? What rating would you give Castlevania Bloodlines for the Genesis, initially released in 1994? Leave a like to save the Belmont Bloodlines, and subscribe for your own pretend tour of Europe. As ever, thank you for watching, and please continue to be your own unique self.
Aged like milk from 1986.